I've known David since we were kids, the kind of friends who grew up side by side, sharing everything from scraped knees to secret dreams. We met in 3rd grade, both shy kids who found comfort in each other's company. Over the years, that friendship became the bedrock of my life. David wasn't just my best friend, he was like a brother, someone who understood me without me having to say a word. We had our usual haunts. There was the old treehouse at the end of Maple Street where we'd spend countless summer afternoons, trading comic books and daring each other to climb higher. Then there was Benny's Diner, a greasy spoon that became our weekend ritual, where we'd sit in the same worn-out booth, sharing fries and laughing until our sides hurt. Those inside jokes we developed were endless, from silly nicknames to secret handshakes we perfected over time. Trust between us was unspoken but absolute. David was the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered, even on your worst days. He had this way of listening that made you believe every word you said was important. We talked about everything: school, girls, family troubles, future plans. He was the one who pushed me to apply for college, who stayed up late helping me study for exams, who never let me give up on myself. Our bond was the kind that you hear about in stories, but rarely experience firsthand. Life felt simple with David around. We had a rhythm: school during the week, basketball games on Friday nights, and lazy Sundays spent exploring the woods behind our neighborhood. We dreamed about moving to the city after graduation, maybe starting a band or opening a small cafe. Those plans seemed so real, so certain, like nothing could ever change them. But then, everything did. It was a chilly October evening when I heard the news. I was sitting at home, flipping through a textbook for an upcoming exam, when my phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, David's sister. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. David had died in a car accident earlier that day. The details were sketchy, but it didn't matter. The person who had been my constant, my confidant, was gone. I remember sitting there, stunned, disbelief washing over me in waves. How could this happen? Just hours ago, we'd been texting about meeting up that weekend. He was supposed to pick me up after work. The world suddenly felt hollow, like a part of me had been ripped away. The days that followed were a blur of grief and numbness. At the funeral, I stood beside his family, trying to hold it together while the reality sank in. Seeing all the people whose lives David had touched made me realize just how much he meant to so many. But for me, the loss was deeply personal. It was the end of an era, the sudden silence where his laughter used to be. In the quiet moments after the funeral, I found myself wandering through our old spots, places that now felt empty and cold. The treehouse was still there, but it didn't have the same magic without him. Benny's Diner felt too loud, the memories crowding the air. I kept replaying our last conversations, searching for signs, for something I might have missed. Grief is a strange thing. It isolates you, but it also forces you to confront pieces of yourself you'd rather ignore. I realized how much I'd taken for granted, how much of my identity was tied up in that friendship. Without David, the future I'd imagined seemed uncertain, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure if I should jump or step back. Friends and family tried to support me, but there's a loneliness in losing someone who knew you so completely. They offered sympathy, but they couldn't fill the space he left behind. I found myself withdrawing, avoiding calls, retreating into memories that were both comforting and painful. Some nights, I'd sit by my window, staring at the stars, thinking about all the plans we made that would never come true. I wondered if he knew how much he mattered, how deeply he was loved. Part of me wished I could talk to him one last time, to tell him everything I never said. In the weeks that followed, I started to write down our memories, trying to hold on to pieces of him before they faded. I wrote about our adventures, the jokes only we understood, the moments that defined our friendship. It was a way to keep him alive, even when he was gone. But amid the sorrow, there was also a strange sense of gratitude. I was grateful for the years we had, for the unwavering bond that had shaped me. David had been my anchor, and even in death, his influence lingered. I knew that moving forward wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to carry his spirit with me. As time passed, I began to notice the small ways his presence remained: a song on the radio, a phrase we used to say, a place we used to hang out. Those reminders were bittersweet, but they helped me heal, piece by piece. Though the pain was raw and the future uncertain, I realized that the friendship we shared was a gift, one that had changed me forever. And even as I struggled to find my way without him, I held on to the hope that somehow, the bond we built would guide me through the darkest days ahead. A few days after the funeral, I found myself at David's apartment, a place I hadn't been since college days when we'd crash on his couch after late-night study sessions. His sister Sarah had given me permission to sort through his things, and though the thought was daunting, I knew I needed to do it. Partly to find some closure, partly because it felt like the right thing to do. The apartment was quiet, filled with the faint scent of his cologne and the faint hum of the city outside. It looked almost frozen in time, his guitar resting against the wall, half-read books on the shelves, a coffee mug still on the kitchen counter. The familiarity was both comforting and painful. I started with the desk, hoping to find some notes or letters he'd left behind. As I sifted through papers, old notebooks, and scattered receipts, I came across an envelope tucked under a stack of mail. It was addressed to me, in David's unmistakable handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what I would find. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the edges slightly worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. The note was brief but cryptic. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. There's more to me than you know, things I never shared, things I couldn't. I wanted you to have this when the time was right. Follow the clues, and you'll understand. Trust no one but yourself. D. Asterisk. I read the note over and over, trying to grasp its meaning. What clues? What secrets? The words stirred a mix of confusion and curiosity inside me. David was always straightforward, never one for mysteries or games. Why would he leave something like this behind? Determined to find answers, I began searching the apartment more carefully, looking for any hint or clue that might lead me to what David wanted me to see. I checked every drawer, every book, every nook and cranny. Eventually, my fingers brushed against a small, locked box hidden beneath his bed. The lock was old-fashioned, a simple combination lock. I didn't know the code, but I remembered something David had said once during a road trip: if you ever need to find me, start with the number of times we watched that old sci-fi movie. We'd watched it 7 times in a row that summer. I tried 777, and to my surprise, the box clicked open. Inside was a collection of letters, photographs, and a worn leather journal. The letters were addressed to people I didn't recognize, thanking them for their kindness and support. The photos showed David with different groups of people, some in our town, others in places I'd never been. There were images of him handing over envelopes to strangers, helping elderly neighbors carry groceries, and volunteering at local shelters. It was a side of him I had never seen. The journal was filled with entries that painted a picture of a man quietly carrying a heavy burden. He wrote about people he was trying to help, often anonymously, and the struggles they faced. There were notes about organizing food drives, raising funds for families in need, and even helping someone escape an abusive situation. David's words revealed a depth of compassion and dedication that I'd never suspected. Reading those pages, I felt a swell of pride and sadness. Pride because David had been doing so much good in the world without ever boasting or asking for recognition. Sadness because I had been oblivious to this part of his life, missing the chance to support him or even just to understand. But the note's warning echoed in my mind: trust no one but yourself. What did that mean? Was there more to this secret life? And why had he chosen to keep it hidden from me, his closest friend? I decided to follow the trail David had left, starting with a list of names and addresses he had written in the back of the journal. Each name came with a brief note, a thank you, a reminder, or a plea for discretion. I recognized a few of the addresses: the community center downtown, a shelter on Elm Street, and a small clinic on the outskirts of town. My first visit was to the community center, a modest building that housed various support programs. I met with Karen, the director, who greeted me warmly but seemed cautious when I mentioned David. When I showed her the journal, her eyes softened. David was a quiet hero here, she said. He never wanted any attention. He helped us fund a food pantry and volunteered countless hours. He was a lifeline for many people in this town. Karen shared stories of David's generosity and kindness, stories I had never heard. She spoke of how he'd often covered expenses for struggling families and arranged for tutoring programs for kids who couldn't afford them. It was clear that David's impact was profound, even if it had remained hidden from most. Encouraged by Karen's openness, I visited the shelter next. There, a woman named Maria recognized David immediately. She told me how he'd helped her escape a dangerous relationship and find a safe place for her children. Her gratitude was palpable, and she expressed sorrow that David hadn't confided in anyone about these efforts. Each conversation peeled back another layer of David's secret life. He had been a guardian angel for many, working behind the scenes to make a difference without ever seeking the spotlight. But why had he kept me, his best friend, in the dark? The more I uncovered, the more I realized how little I truly knew about the men I thought I understood completely. There were parts of David, his struggles, his fears, his determination, that he had concealed even from me. It was a humbling revelation, one that left me questioning how well anyone can truly know another person. As I closed the journal that evening, a mix of emotions swirled inside me: wonder, admiration, confusion, and a deep ache for the friend I had lost. David's secret life was a testament to his character, but it was also a reminder that people often carry hidden burdens and untold stories. I was left with one clear thought: I owed it to David, and to myself, to follow wherever this path led. To understand the men behind the smile, the friend behind the mystery. And maybe, in doing so, to find a way to carry forward the legacy he had quietly built. I didn't know where this journey would take me when I first opened that locked box in David's apartment. But as I followed the trail of clues he'd left behind, a clearer picture began to emerge, one that revealed a side of David I'd never imagined. He wasn't just the easygoing, joke-cracking friend I'd known. He was someone who carried the weight of the world quietly on his shoulders, working tirelessly to help others without ever seeking recognition. After visiting the community center and the shelter, I found myself drawn deeper into the network David had woven. I reached out to a few more names from his journal, each connection revealing more about the secret charity project he had been part of. It wasn't a formal organization, at least not in the usual sense. It was a grassroots effort, a web of people committed to helping the vulnerable in our community, families struggling to put food on the table, kids without the resources to succeed, elderly neighbors facing isolation. One afternoon, I met Tom, an older man who ran a small thrift shop that doubled as a donation point for essentials. When I mentioned David, Tom's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. David was the backbone of a lot of this, Tom said, motioning around the cluttered shop. He coordinated donations, organized volunteer shifts, made sure nobody fell through the cracks. But he never wanted anyone to know. He believed the work was about the people, not the praise. Tom shared stories about David's struggles too, how he juggled a demanding job while pouring energy into these projects, often sacrificing his own needs. It was clear that David's commitment came from a deep sense of responsibility, a personal mission to make things better for those around him. As I spoke with more people David had quietly supported, a pattern became evident. He had been a lifeline for many, stepping in when others couldn't or wouldn't. From paying utility bills to arranging medical appointments, from tutoring kids to simply providing a listening ear, David's generosity was boundless. Yet he had kept it all under wraps, maintaining the easygoing persona I'd always known. One evening, I sat down with Karen, the community center director, to discuss what I'd discovered. She looked at me thoughtfully. David's humility was his greatest strength, she said. He didn't want anyone to feel indebted to him. He understood that dignity was just as important as help. That's why he stayed in the shadows. Her words resonated with me. I thought about the countless times David had been there for me, offering support without asking for anything in return. But this secret charity work added a new dimension to my understanding of him. It was as if there were two Davids, one visible, one hidden, both equally real but known to different people. The more I learned, the more I realized how much David had carried alone. His journal entries hinted at moments of doubt and exhaustion, times when the weight of others' problems threatened to overwhelm him. Yet he never wavered. He wrote about the importance of resilience and hope, about believing that even small acts of kindness could ripple outward and create change. This discovery challenged everything I thought I knew. How could someone so close to me have kept this part of his life a secret? Was it shame, or simply a desire to protect those he helped? The questions gnawed at me, but they also deepened my admiration for David. It took a rare kind of courage to give so much without recognition. One afternoon, I found myself at a small cafe where David used to meet with a few people involved in the charity project. There, I met Lisa, a young woman who had been mentored by David. She told me about how he had helped her through a difficult time, encouraging her to finish school and pursue her dreams. He never made me feel like a charity case, Lisa said, her eyes shining with emotion. He believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Her words struck a chord. David's impact wasn't just about tangible aid, it was about restoring hope and dignity. He had been a beacon for many, quietly inspiring change through compassion. As I pieced together these stories, I began to see how David's secret charity project was more than just a series of good deeds. It was a reflection of who he was at his core, a man committed to kindness and justice, willing to shoulder burdens so others wouldn't have to. And yet, he had chosen to keep this part of himself hidden, even from me. That realization was bittersweet. On one hand, I felt privileged to uncover this hidden legacy, to know the depth of David's character. On the other, I wrestled with a sense of loss, not just for the friend I had lost, but for the parts of him I never got to see. I spent that night reflecting on the complexities of friendship and trust. How well do we truly know the people closest to us? David's secret life challenged my assumptions, reminding me that everyone carries stories beneath the surface, stories of struggle, sacrifice, and resilience. Holding his journal in my hands, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. David had given me a gift, albeit a painful one, the chance to understand him more fully, to honor his memory by continuing the work he cared about. It was a responsibility I didn't take lightly. I decided to reach out to others involved in the charity project, to learn how I could help. I wanted to carry forward David's mission, to ensure that his quiet acts of kindness didn't fade away with him. It was a way to keep his spirit alive, to turn grief into action. In the weeks that followed, I immersed myself in the community David had nurtured. I attended meetings, helped organize events, and met many of the people whose lives had been touched by his generosity. Each interaction reinforced the impact one person could have when motivated by genuine compassion. Through this process, I began to heal, not by forgetting David, but by embracing the fullness of who he was. His secret charity work revealed a man of depth and courage, someone who faced his own challenges while lifting others up. It was a powerful reminder that people are often more complex than they appear, and that true friendship can encompass even the unspoken parts. As I continued down this path, I felt a growing connection to David, not just as my best friend, but as a man who had shaped the world in ways I was only beginning to understand. It was a journey of discovery, reflection, and ultimately, gratitude for the extraordinary person he had been. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself wrestling with a storm of conflicting emotions. The more I uncovered about David's hidden life, the more I questioned everything I thought I knew about him, and about friendship itself. How could someone so close to me have lived a secret life, carrying burdens and performing acts of kindness that I knew nothing about? It was a question that haunted me, and one I struggled to answer. I kept returning to that note he left, the one that warned me to trust no one but yourself. What did he mean by that? Was it a hint that even those closest to him couldn't be fully trusted? Or was it a warning about the world he was trying to protect, the fragile lives he was trying to shield? The ambiguity of his words unsettled me. I began to reflect on the nature of friendship and trust. I had always believed that David and I shared everything, that our bond was unbreakable because of our openness with each other. But now I realized that even in the deepest relationships, there are parts of ourselves we choose to keep hidden. Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of necessity. This realization was both painful and humbling. I felt a pang of guilt for not seeing beyond the surface, for not recognizing the struggles he was silently enduring. Had I failed him as a friend? Could I have helped him carry some of those burdens if only I had known? Yet, at the same time, I understood why he might have kept these things to himself. David was a deeply private person, someone who valued the dignity of those he helped above all else. He didn't want to be a hero or a savior in anyone's eyes, he just wanted to make a difference quietly, without fanfare or expectation. I thought about my own life and the masks we all wear. How often do we reveal our true selves to others? How many stories do we bury beneath polite smiles and casual conversations? David's secret life was a stark reminder that people are more complex than they appear, and that understanding someone fully is a lifelong journey, one that requires patience, empathy, and sometimes acceptance of the unknowable. The weight of these thoughts pressed down on me. I found myself wondering if anyone could ever truly know another person, not just the parts they show but the parts they hide. It was a sobering question, one that challenged my assumptions about friendship and intimacy. Despite the confusion, I also felt a deep respect for David's strength. To live with such quiet courage, to carry the pain of others without complaint, was an extraordinary act. It made me reevaluate what it meant to be strong, to be selfless, to be a friend. In the quiet moments of reflection, I realized that my relationship with David was richer and more complex than I had ever imagined. The friendship we shared wasn't diminished by the secrets he kept. If anything, it was deepened by the newfound understanding of the man he was beneath the surface. I also recognized that grief was not just about loss but about learning to live with the unknown. With David gone, there were parts of him I would never fully grasp, and that was a reality I had to come to terms with. It was a painful lesson, but also an important one. I began to talk about these feelings with others, friends, family, even some of the people David had helped. Their perspectives helped me see that hidden depths and private struggles are part of the human experience, and that sometimes, the greatest acts of love are those done in silence. Through these conversations, I found a measure of peace. I accepted that some parts of David's life would remain a mystery, but that didn't lessen the impact he had on me or on the community. His legacy was not just in the deeds he did but in the compassion and humility with which he lived. At the same time, I felt a renewed sense of connection to him. The discovery of his secret charity work challenged me to be a better friend, a more attentive listener, and a kinder person. It was as if David's spirit was guiding me, encouraging me to carry forward his values even in his absence. I thought about the future and the role I wanted to play in preserving what David had built. It wasn't just about continuing the charity work, it was about honoring the complexities of human relationships, the trust, the secrets, the vulnerabilities. In many ways, this journey was teaching me that true friendship is not about knowing every detail of someone's life but about holding space for all the parts they choose to share or conceal. It's about accepting that people are multifaceted, and that love and respect endure even through the unknown. As I navigated these emotions, I also grappled with my own fears and uncertainties. Could I live up to the example David had set? Could I carry the mantle of his quiet heroism without losing myself? These questions lingered, but I felt ready to face them, inspired by the men who had been my best friend. Late at night, when the world was still and the memories came rushing back, I often found myself reaching for his journal or rereading the letters he'd left behind. They were reminders, not just of who David was but of the kind of person I aspired to be. The journey was far from over, and I knew there would be challenges ahead. But with each step, I was learning to embrace the complexities of friendship, grief, and human connection. And in doing so, I was discovering a deeper understanding of myself, and of the friend I thought I knew so well. Accepting David's hidden life as part of his multifaceted identity wasn't easy, but over time, I realized it was essential. The man I thought I knew, the friend who'd shared so much of his life with me, was also someone who had chosen to carry his burdens and kindnesses quietly, away from the spotlight. Embracing this truth allowed me to honor him more fully, not just for who he was to me, but for the difference he quietly made in the world. I resolved to carry on the work he began, to keep alive the secret charity project that had meant so much to him and to so many others. It felt like a calling, a way to connect with David beyond grief, to transform my loss into purpose. I reached out to the people he'd trusted, those I'd met along the way, and together, we started rebuilding the network he'd nurtured. The first step was organizing a meeting at the community center. I was nervous, unsure if I could fill David's shoes or if I was even worthy of the task. But the room was filled with familiar faces, volunteers, recipients of aid, friends of David, and their warmth was a balm to my uncertainty. They welcomed me without hesitation, sharing stories and ideas, reminding me that the project was bigger than any one person. We began by continuing the food drives and tutoring programs, slowly expanding outreach to families struggling in our town. It was hard work, often exhausting, but every smile, every word of thanks, reminded me why David had devoted himself to this cause. I found myself growing into the role, fueled by the memory of his quiet strength and unwavering commitment. Over time, I noticed changes, not just in the community, but in myself. I became more patient, more attentive to the needs of others, and more willing to listen without judgment. David's example challenged me to be better, to live with the same humility and compassion he had shown. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old notes David had left behind, I found a letter addressed to me. It was dated months before his death, and reading it felt like hearing his voice again. Asterisk, if you're reading this, it means you're carrying the torch. Don't let the world's noise drown out the quiet good we can do. Remember, it's not about recognition but about kindness. Trust yourself, and know that I'm with you in every step. Asterisk. Tears blurred my vision, but I felt a surge of pride and resolve. David's faith in me was humbling, and it strengthened my commitment to continue his legacy. As the months passed, the project grew. We added new programs, brought in more volunteers, and created a support system that reached deeper into the community than ever before. I watched as lives changed, children gaining confidence, families finding stability, neighbors rediscovering hope. It was the living proof of what David had always believed, that small acts of kindness could ripple outward and transform lives. Alongside this work, I found myself reflecting often on the nature of friendship and the unseen depths within us all. David's secret life had taught me that people carry hidden stories, complex emotions, and silent battles. It reminded me to approach others with empathy and humility, to recognize that what we see is only part of the whole. One day, during a community dinner we organized, Lisa, the young woman David had mentored, approached me. She smiled warmly. "Thank you for continuing what David started," she said. "He believed in second chances, and now you're giving that to so many." Her words filled me with a quiet joy. It was a moment that crystallized everything I'd learned and everything I hoped to build. As the sun set, casting golden light through the windows, I looked around the room filled with laughter and hope. The journey that began with loss had brought us all together, weaving a new tapestry of connection and care. I often think about how different my life would be if I hadn't found that note, hadn't followed the clues, hadn't dared to step into the unknown. David's hidden life, once a mystery, had become a beacon guiding me toward a purpose greater than myself. Now, as I carry on his work, I feel a renewed sense of belonging and meaning. The friendship that seemed lost has transformed into a legacy that lives on, in the people we help, in the community we build, and in the quiet courage that David taught me to embrace. It's a reminder that sometimes, the most profound connections and the deepest impacts are found not in what is spoken aloud, but in the silent acts of love and kindness that ripple through our lives long after we're gone. If you love the story, like the video and subscribe.